welcome to the 22.2 unboxing video. So in this video we are going to watch 22 months of innovation and features being added on top of a 20.4 environment. So we are running a Siebel CRM update to 22.2, and the process is similar to previous updates and will likely be similar in future updates, so it applies to a wide range of releases. And before we get started with the hands-on real-time video, let's take a very quick look at what happened between 20.4 and 22.2. So let's start with what's new for developers. If you are a developer on a release around 20.4 and your project is updating to 22.2, or even if you're in an upgrade project to 22 dot something, these are very important features, and we're going to take a very fast look at them. I'm going through the slides very quickly. If you want to see everything in much greater detail, please watch the individual monthly update summaries for free on the Siebel Hub YouTube channel. You find the link in the description. Workflow is now completely managed by workspaces. We have several enhancements in the outbound REST infrastructure. Browser scripts no longer require Gen-B script. Test automation has several enhancements. Web tools gets a lot of attention, and in 22.2 you have, for example, a fully functional script editor and debugger. You have a workflow editor, and you have a web service import wizard. You have a workflow process simulator. And you can import and export ZIF files in Siebel Web Tools. The REST API gets a lot of tiny enhancements along these 22 months, and one noteworthy is the attachment support. So what's new for administrators when you are updating to 22.2 or similar, or upgrading to the current Siebel release? The migration application, if you have been using it, it changes how it connects to the Siebel data. Security is much more enforced with TLS 1.2. The desktop integration Siebel agent now has a different configuration file. And you will use the modular deployment engine to run your installations and updates. And this is a very significant change for administrators, of course, so watch the respective monthly update video. But you will encounter a new unified folder structure in your enterprise components, such as SES, AI, or Gateway. And the application container folder for the AI is also renamed, and there's a new Siebel WebRoot folder. Administrators working in projects with IMAP and POP3 implementations will have to make changes. Zookeeper gets an update as well to 3.6. And there's a new data export architecture coming to a Siebel environment near you if you update or upgrade to 22 or higher. If you are used to renaming your repositories after full migration with SQL, this is no longer supported. And there is a new view for workflow monitoring configuration. Last but not least, for administrators, very importantly, you might have been part of the update or upgrade project because of the Log4j vulnerabilities, which are fully addressed. And the debug server is new if you come from 20.4, as in our example, and you will have to make sure that the debug server is up and running for your developers so they can use it. There's also news for application users. In the past 22 months, Oracle has added or removed features. So let's take a look. Smartphone UX is a good example for mobile users who want to use the Siebel mobile applications in the comfort of the small smartphone screen. There is support for the mouse wheel, so the list applets now scroll as you turn your mouse wheel. And an example for removal of features is that the developer preview, however, it was never productive, but the Siebel Enterprise cache along with the advanced constraint engine is no longer. So as we have briefly covered the past 22 months, and that was very fast, of course, so again, the link for a more detailed monthly updates is in the description. Let's take a very quick look, as this and the following slides are also very detailed in the monthly updates. The update path that we will do. So we will do an update from 20.4 to 22.2. So this is the path we have ahead. We will start on a machine that we have made sure it has a backup. The environment database can be easily restored. We will run the modular deployment engine, and we will run the mandatory post-install database update to make sure that it's completed. We will also run in this video the non-mandatory repository upgrade just to see what it's like when you run it on 22 months worth of enhancements, and we'll see what happens to the repository. And we will also discuss, but briefly, the configuration instructions as an example, and we will also talk about administrative changes as an example. We will apply the DISA update. We'll install the latest version of DISA along with 22.2. So these gray boxes on the process are not mandatory, but they could impose significant time and effort in your project. So make sure that you understand all the implications of the update. While in the video we see an update on top of a development environment, there is of course test production, higher RR environments that you also will need to update. So the process is very similar. Take a backup, run the MDE, make sure that post-installation database update has run on the database. So it has to be run once per database. And if you have any repository changes, it's the turn of the migration application to bring these changes from your development environment to test or production. And then you might have some administrative changes to apply, such as install DISA on the test machines of your Siebel test automation, etc. So we start with a look at the existing 20.4 environment. You see on the screen that it's a slightly customized OpenUI customizations are visible environment. So there's a nice toolbar menu. Let's take a look at some existing screens in 20.4, like the repository workflow process view, which is also known as the active workflow process view. And we just notice that only 9 workflow processes are actually active in this database, whereas there are 1,800 plus standard workflows. And it's indeed a 20.4 environment, as we can see. Let's take a look at Siebel tools. So we see all these 1,800 workflow processes active in the repository. That's a thing that will change, and we'll observe this change once we have run the update, because the workflow architecture will change. So here we look at Siebel tools 20.4, of course. So let's get started. We have downloaded the packages, the zip packages, and for this ENU only environment, we will use only one of the 10 zip files for Windows. First, to make sure the environment is fully stopped. So there's a stop script we run here. And let's take a look at the zip files. The 1 of 10 file, if you open that one, it contains the README document. You should take all the time you need to understand that document, and the media list file, where you can see the content of each zip file. So we see the 2 of 10 file has the Siebel binaries. It's mandatory. 3 of 10 is the non-ENU safe boot, so that translates into you need that if you have non-ENU languages. So we will only, for this ENU only environment, we'll only need to unpack 2 of 10. 3 of 10 only if you have language packs. So here's the 2 of 10 file. Again, if you have a language pack, you need to extract the second and third zip file. So let's get rid of this old installer and extract the necessary zip files. Any long-running process is sped up in this video, so not to waste your time. So now we have the disk1 folder where the installer is located. We go to install, and then we have the setup.bat file for Windows, which we run as administrator. And on this machine that you see, we have all the Siebel instances. We have server, AI, web, Siebel tools, and the developer web client, as well as DISA. So the installer asks for the home. So if you select an existing home, like we do here for SES, it will go into migration mode. It's a pre-MDE version. There's nothing to select here really. And if it's run on top of an SES instance, you get this page, the post-installation database options. So we opt for execute in the drop-down on top, which is the default. So it runs as part of the MDE. And we make sure we have the correct values here. Some of these values might be seeded from upgrade configuration files which are present on your system. So here, just making sure that database is running, and I'm verifying the sadmin user can log in. So that's okay. So database connectivity is there. So let's fill in the passwords. And you might need to use a different ODBC data source. So in our case, on this machine that we are using here, we are going to change the ODBC data source. So look up the existing 32-bit data sources. There's one ORCL, which we have created for the purpose. Then make sure the index and table index space, table space names are correct. And if you have any other languages, you need to click them in this list. We have an ENU only installation. So once you click install, the process is running, and we need to wait for it to complete. So let's speed this up a little bit and watch the highlights, and then of course we watch the outcome. So this is the update of a Siebel Server 20.4 instance with the post-installation database update, which is mandatory, running. If you only need to run the post-installation database update on the per database, once per database. So if you have like 5 servers, you only need to select it once and opt out on the other 4 servers. Or you decide to opt out and run it manually. So we see the binary copies going on. The update installer, in the case of a migration update from a pre-MDE topology, will have secured the entire old installation by simply renaming the folder. So your old configuration is completely safe. But apart from that, it is of course very prudent to take machine backups and database backups, because very soon the post-installation database update will start, and it will modify your database. It will change the schema, import data. Before that happens, we see on the screen that the migration update mode looks for customer modified files in the old preserved folder and copies them over to the new folder structure. So we'll see the implications of that once the process is complete. And for good measure, we just fire up the task manager and watch the processes going. So now the post installation has started. So what I'm looking here in the task manager is the Tomcat has been replaced with the new version, and it's actually starting up right now. So and also on some Windows machines, at least on this machine, on this type of machine that I'm using for demos, the Siebel server and gateway are also started up by the installer. So I'm watching for the Siebel server to actually come up, and then I will just kill it because I don't want the Siebel server to start while the post-install database update is running. So this might not be necessary on your environment. But it does not make any much sense to start a Siebel server while the database is updated to 22. So completely unnecessary. We start the Siebel server later. So we see a lot of activity related to the post-install database update. Here's the Siebel server just starting up, so I just kill it. Again, this is just a thing I do in this environment. It's interesting that the post-install database setup executable is a container, an orchestration for several other utilities, including Siebel CLI, the headless Siebel tools that is available on Windows and Linux servers alike. And this Siebel CLI does the grunt work of importing SIF files for the schema, for example, new table definitions, and applying these changes to your database on DR and RR environment alike. So your database changes. It's important to understand that. So a backup is really mandatory. So if anything goes wrong, you just go back to the original and correct the problem and start over. And putting this on top of a 22 months old version like 20.4 results in a lengthy process. So we have been speeding this up here, and we see that according to the installer, everything was fine. And what I'm doing here is going to the latest bookshelf, 22.2 at the time of recording, the database upgrade guide, because it has a chapter since 21.10 documenting the exit codes for the post-installation database update. And I'm very interested in making sure that the post-installation database update has run completely. So let's go to the log folder. It uses the log folder. Here we see the previous, the preserved folder, by the way. So here's the new SES folder, completely new with the new topology. Still there is a Siebel server folder, and that has a log folder. And in that log folder, you have the logs of the post-install database update. So let's take a look at the text file. And at the bottom of this, we expect the return code. In our case, it's 1. So what does 1 mean? This is what Bookshelf tells us. Both seed and schema and workflow upgrade have been successful. So that is looking very good right now, but I want to make very sure. So I take a look at the HTML report, which has, well, the big green thing on top, successful execution. And take your time. In real life, in reality, you would take your time and analyze this report, maybe drill down and see the log files and see what has happened to your database in these minutes. So you see schema changes for each version that you have crossed. So we're crossing a lot of versions, 20.4 to 22.2. That's 22 versions. And each and every version could have or could not have schema, seed, and manifest upgrades. And there's the workflow upgrade that also happens because we are pre 20.7. So a lot of things have happened to the workflows, and we'll see what that was. There's some timings for us, and there's individual pages in the report detailing out all the tables and columns that have been modified with the version number. So that's very nice, including the repository version number, for example, in 21.10, which has been introduced, which is a very significant change. And the manifest changes you can make out here to support mostly what we see here is web tool stuff and seed data grouped by the individual tables, so you can see what data has been imported, such as, for example, system preferences. Yes, we get some system preferences with Siebel update, and probably we need to understand what they're good for and if we need to make any changes. So these are the administrative changes that we talked about. Okay, so the SES update to 22.2 was successful. The mandatory part is done. And let's take another look at the new topology. So application container, external, internal, but only internal is used for the internal Tomcat. Zookeeper update, yes, the old Zookeeper folder is backed up, the new registry folder, and the new registry CFG file. So the files and folder names have been changed. So if you have any scripts, any custom scripts that refer to these, snap count should be set to 100,000, has the old value. So I'm setting the snap count here. Yeah, so make sure as an administrator you understand the implications of these folder name changes, folder structural changes. If you look at the services on Windows, let's stop the gateway here. It has been kicked off by the installer. So we find the new version of the Tomcat. So it's replace sets to automatic. I like it manual on my systems, so I'm going to stop it. And also, because the services have been replaced on Windows, you need to reconfigure them for your memory values especially. So we go to ES, edit service, Tomcat 9W, and in the Java section, change the ridiculously low memory to something meaningful. This is a training environment, so 2 GB is more than we need for an internal Tomcat. In real life, in your project, these values might, of course, be different. And also the service name on Windows has changed. So here we have a custom script to start the environment, so we need to make sure the script still works. And that's another implication of those 22-month time span. We have to make sure all our custom scripts are referencing the correct service names, folder names, etc. So it's all in a day's work for the administrator. And these are just examples for the administrative steps that you might have to undertake during an update from, well, a significantly older version of Siebel CRM. It's almost 2 years old. Okay, so we have taken care of the SES. Now let's update the AI. It's a similar process. You kick off the MDE on any machine where you have an AI, and you select the AI home. And it will detect its pre-MDE, so it will go into migration mode. You see migrate installation on top here, and there's nothing else to do really than to hit install. Again, the existing folder will be preserved by renaming it, and there will be an entirely new folder created, and custom files will be copied over. That is on an AI especially important, as you will have a lot of custom files, custom scripts, custom style sheets, custom images, and they will be taken care of, and we'll see if that process really works as expected at the end of this presentation when we power up the 22.2 2022 environment. So now it's on its way to update the AI by installing the new AI folder. It has copied over the files. This is a high-speed version. It's not the real runtime. And now there's a replacement service for the old Tomcat. And again, I like my Tomcats manual, and copy the path to the executable and use that path to go into edit mode for the service. This is Windows only. On Linux, you have the environment files where you make these changes and make sure you have enough memory allocated. And the service name has changed as well. So go to the custom startup scripts and shutdown scripts and make sure the references are A-OK. So you see there's a veritable checklist that you have to make for an update to a higher version, especially if you cross a lot of months. In this case, we are 20.4 to 22.2. That's 22 months of innovation. So here's the previous folder, the preserved AI, and the new AI. So it has the new topology. So again, folder names have changed and paths have changed, and all your custom stuff is now in Siebel WebRoot. Let's check it out. Yes, there's a lot of custom JavaScript, and it has been migrated automatically by the MDE. Thank you very much. Of course, we have to run the application and run some tests to make sure that everything is in place again. Okay, so that was the AI. Next up is Siebel Tools. Siebel Tools, on any machine where you have Siebel Tools, you will need to run the MDE and then select your Siebel Tools home. And very similar to the AI update, nothing really to be selected other than clicking install. And again, there will be a backup copy of the old folder and an entirely new folder with custom files being copied over. So the tools update is complete. And of course, we're curious what happened to tools. So here's the old preserved folder. And you might have some files in there which have not been migrated. So check out your tool CFG or copies of that. And let's see if Siebel Tools starts. And yes, it does. So this is Siebel Tools 22.2 on top of a database that has the post-install database updates already. So your workspaces, of course, should still be visible. This is a development environment. Nothing has changed with that. And let's change the changed date so we can identify any repository changes. So do we expect repository changes? Yes, sort of, because the post-install database update imports schema changes, not any other repository artifacts really, but there are some mandatory schema changes. And with the new update changed date, we can identify the tables that have been imported or modified. So there's just 5 tables here, but significant that the post-install database update utility has actively modified your database schema already. And the workflow update portion has, wow, inactivated how many? All of them? No, let's see. It has inactivated all but the workflow processes that we're really using that were active, plus a few system workflows, mostly for the migration application. So that is a significant change as well. You have hundreds of inactive workflows now. Not that it's a bad thing, you never used them. And now we are going to run the non-mandatory repository upgrade. It's non-mandatory, so keep that in mind when you watch the next few minutes. You don't have to do it. If you do it on a development environment. Only development environments are supported. So it tells you what parameters it needs. And it will create a integration workspace in your development database, keeping all the changes safe from your own main or integration workspaces. So it's not a problem to run it. You can ignore the changes by simply not delivering that integration workspace. But if you want to know what repository artifacts, how many, and what kind of artifacts are delivered by Oracle and not deemed mandatory, so only for customers who really elect of using them, that is a very interesting approach. And if you have time and you want to really understand what is in the repository upgrade for you, then you can follow these steps safely, because again, the data is only imported in a new integration workspace. So here, just make sure we have the correct index table space names for the table spaces required by the utility. Okay, watch out for language packs if you have them. Add them through the W parameter. We have E and U only, so we are running this. So the repository upgrade is now running. And let's watch it. So this is almost real time. We have been speeding up the video a little bit to eliminate the boring parts. And we can watch activity on the machine, the typical Siebel utilities, ODBC, SQL, and then later siebdev CLI, DDL imp. So this utility imports schema changes as well. As we can see here, schema installation starts, but it will also import seed data and real repository artifacts besides tables and manifest data. So that is a very long process. As you can see, we are spanning 22 versions, and the installer is taking care of 20.3 to 22.2 here. And that of course takes a while, can take several hours. So we have to be patient here while siebdev CLI does the thing. So here we've been speeding up. So it has imported all the schema CIF files and now synchronizes the schema. Basically DDL sync is happening. And there's an error here. So this is real life. So I haven't cut out this error here. An error during synchronization. And that's a good thing. So errors can happen. So let's check the log file here. And that log file reports trouble with a specific standard table. So that's odd, but it happens. And that standard table I've also seen in a log file of an upgrade. Not sure what it is, but there is a column which is part of a function index. And it couldn't update that column. So what I'm doing here is go to SQL Developer, take a look at the indexes, and there's indeed a function-based index. And that's a life sciences table. So, and if there are changes to that index, they will be in the repository. So we can, what I'm doing here, you should of course consult with Oracle what you should do. What I'm doing here is dropping this index. Doesn't hurt, the data still stays in the table. And the DDL sync will make sure the index is created according to the repository. That's at least my assumption. Again, you should check with Oracle support if you have this problem. So, and then the important part is you can just rerun repository upgrade. I'm running it on the same database. It will just repeat all the steps. Or you could revert to a backup if you have one. So now I've just kicked off the repository upgrade one more time, this time hoping the synchronization of the schema goes well. Okay, the schema updates are okay, and now you see the repository import starting. So now one ZIF file per release, probably, there might be releases that have no ZIF files, is imported by the trustee siebdev CLI executable into that new integration workspace. So an integration workspace is created, and inside that you get a developer workspace. In this case, it's called dev-satmin Siebel _22_2. So the version number is part of the development workspace name you can see here. And that development workspace is a child of an integration workspace that the process creates. So you're always safe. None of your custom or standard business components or applets gets affected by this. And we're speeding up here, so the real runtime is much slower as we get past the 21 mark, so just 12 imports more to go. And there are literally hundreds of object definitions in those ZIF files, and some of them being updated. So like it's imported in 21.10 and then fixed in 22.1, for example. Workflow, for instance, that could happen. So we'll soon be able to log into Siebel Tools and see what actually has been imported. So 21.8 is imported. The non-mandatory repository artifacts for 21.8, 21.9 are imported. And now we are at the end of the process. So we see there was a manifest and seed import as well. And there is a nice HTML report similar to the post-install database update. And it's green, which makes it very good. And we can see the schema changes. We can see the log files, repository, and seed changes. So the big difference to the post-install database update is that there are hundreds of repository artifacts along with the necessary schema, manifest, and seed changes. So, for example, 3 applications seem to have been imported or maybe updated. So it's the latter. We're looking at applets here. There's a list of business components that have been inserted or updated. And since we're spanning 22 versions, the list is impressive. Yes, it's a lot of work that Oracle invests every month, and that is cumulative here. So we see the cumulated effort of Oracle to enhance or create new functionality in Siebel CRM. We see the table changes. See the manifest changes and the seed changes. Seed data is arranged by table. So a nice looking report, really. Like, okay, which list of values have been added to the database? And list of values is of course very special as well. Responsibilities have been added. So it's important to really take a backup of the database before you do it, because all of this stuff is outside of the workspace, and even if you don't import the workspace, you have this stuff sitting in your database, and you might not like that. So when I said earlier you're on the safe side, it's repository safe, because you have that integration Siebel update workspace. It's an integration workspace, and the developer workspace has been delivered into that integration workspace, but the integration workspace has not been delivered. So you can take all the time you need to inspect and compare the objects. So there are lots of applets, business component changes, updates, inserts. Insert could mean it's just been activated. So it was inactive, dormant, and now it's active. But that is a lot. There are hundreds of object definitions, including parts of bigger packages like the crowd twist integration. There are integration objects, workflows, business services, symbolic strings. So make sure your tool CFG is using SBL as the symbolic string prefix when you deliver or rebase. Yeah, there's workflow processes being inserted, aka activated, or really inserted. They are new. So new standard workflows, updates to standard workflows. Again, you might want to take your time with this information and make sure if you have modified the same standard objects to make sure that you don't have any severe critical conflicts. So now it's time to open this integration workspace and we try to deliver it. So we submit for delivery and tools tells us, okay, we need to do a rebase. So sometimes, most of the times, I get a rebase here at this point. So let's run the rebase. There's nothing else we can do. The rebase will modify the integration workspace and bring in the changes, in this case from main 17 or any main version that you have at this moment. So again, we're speeding up here. The rebase, it's hundreds of objects, so the rebase takes a while. Okay, and time to resolve conflicts. So this brings us in Siebel Tools to the merge overview view, where you can see the recent merges and rebases. And you can, again, you should take your time to understand what happened to each object and what conflicts are reported. There could be name conflicts. So in this case, it's the list of values integration object, which has been created manually to support the LOV import service, also created manually in a previous version. And now it's part of the package, so it clashes. It's a name clash. The rebase will literally create a copy of the object with rebase in the name. There shouldn't be any critical conflicts here, but again, it's very useful information, and you should take your time to analyze and understand the information before you continue. Again, we have done a rebase, so we're not touching the main workspace or any other integration workspace right now. Well, some point in time, we have to finish the rebase. Okay, let's finish it. Okay. So it's interesting to see maybe in the background, SiebDev CLI is kicked off by Siebel Tools to actually do that. Well, whatever. Finish the rebase. So the rebase publish process is running in a separate process. And that's interesting. But the process will eventually complete and we get a message in Siebel Tools. Okay, there's the message. So the rebase is finished. So the next thing we're going to do is submit and deliver the int Siebel update workspace. So we see the objects that have been rebased. So these are objects that have been created in versions prior to the base version of the integration workspace. And we see we can now submit for delivery and we can then deliver. So that is now creating a new version of main in your development environment with all these hundreds of new and updated repository artifacts that are delivered by Oracle as part of the non-mandatory repository upgrade. Again, we're looking at the non-mandatory repository upgrade, and it's your decision if you go down that route or if you do with a subset of the changes or consult with Oracle, etc. So we are speeding up the merge process again, and it's done now. So time to, well, install another round of updates because we have, on this machine at least, we have a Siebel developer web client. Not that I personally use it much in these days with 21, 22, because the script editor, workflow simulator is all in web tools and works nicely and fast. But it's on the machine, so let's give it an update. Same procedure, copies the old folder, creates a new folder. Of course, you can run a test. So if you still use the developer web client, and of course, this is also true for any mobile web client if you use Siebel Remote still. Then there's the whole concept of the local database. Let's not discuss this here. So here we have the preserved old client folder. All these preserved folders could be archived and put somewhere else, of course. And we have DISA. So we're using Siebel test automations, and among other things, you should make sure when you spend 22 months, get the latest version of DISA. Your end users might use it, and your test users for running automated tests with Siebel test automation. Here I'm killing the old, still running DISA version of 20.4. Yeah, so it's gone. And running the new 22.2 installer. So DISA versions now are the same, following the same patterns. So it's no longer 2.20.4, it's 22.2. And if you spend that many months, you should get yourself a new version of DISA. So it tries to update to 20.4, but there is a slight annoying issue here. It can't really proceed. So what we have to do in this case is remove DISA manually using the Windows remove feature. So yeah, here we find the DISA installation. And it will not remove the entire folder, that's what I noticed. So your custom plugins, etc. are still safe. But still, a backup is, of course, the intelligent thing to do. So this is just uninstalling the old DISA version. And this is due to the fact that we're spending 22 months and the DISA architecture maybe can't really cope. And now we can run the DISA 22.2 installer again. This time, hopefully, it will complete. And here we go. So it goes into a new installation mode. We choose the same folder. It finds the existing files with the settings, with the allow list, as it's now called. It's no longer called whitelist. Use the existing key store. And just keeping all the defaults, really. Okay, so DISA 22.2 is already firing up, as we can see in the system tray. There it is, nice and easy. But there's one thing about DISA, when you use it for test automation, for the playback in unit test mode, you have, well, let's take a look at the properties file. Looks good, has all the previous values. Now allow list instead of whitelist. And there's in Siebel test automation, the unit config XML is actually overwritten with the vanilla, with a wrong URL, basically pointing to some Oracle server, and we need to change that. So this is one of the changes you might have in your checklist if you use DISA for unit testing. This will be only a few machines where you have to do it. Okay, so the URL is amended. And the DISA installation should be complete. We'll know when we launch the application. Which it's about time to do it, actually. So here, let's start that custom script that I have here to launch the Siebel server environment. And of course, we have to wait for it to complete, and speeding this up again. So here the environment is started and the first login to 22.2 call center, updated from 20.4. Let's see if the OpenUI stuff worked. The automatic migration of custom files, remember? Okay, watching the console. That is looking not too bad. Even this works, which I'm a bit confused about, but it might be the cache, the browser cache, tricking us a little bit. But looking good so far. So it's a 22.2 application. And let's clear the browser cache. I want to make sure that it does not use anything from the cache and do a reload. And okay, now I'm seeing it can't load a custom font I installed. Font awesome. That is because the automated process of copying the custom files does not include the fonts folder. So there is a custom folder in fonts. So that is now in, or actually in the previous. So the custom fonts is in the preserved folder. So keep a copy of that. You might need it. So this was in application container web apps, Siebel. There's fonts, and this custom folder I created for customizations. It has some custom fonts. And now go to the new folder, application container external, Siebel web root, fonts. Well, no custom folder here, so I copy over the folder from the preserved folder. And that's one of the steps that you have to do. And now the icon for the toolbar is back again. Okay, let's verify 22.2, even with the repository version displayed here, which is a good indicator that the repository upgrade was completed. If you don't complete the repository upgrade, you have 17.0 here. Or actually you can't see it at all because the technical support applet is updated as well. And let's pay a visit to some of the interesting views for new versions. Things you don't have in 20.4, the monitoring configuration view, only showing the active workflows, and you can set the monitoring level. And for example, the data export screen, supporting the Unity and CrowdTwist integration. And you should see some C data here as well. So that means the mandatory and non-mandatory parts of the update have been completed successfully. In the settings, let's go to message broadcast. There's another feature, the maximum message count field is added in what I believe 22.1. So it's a very recent addition, and it has worked because we run the repository upgrade. So let's log out of the application. It's a very quick test, of course. You need more testing. What about Siebel Web Tools? Let's pay the visit. Siebel Web Tools should also be in, of course, the new version. Again, a browser cache refresh might be the right thing to do. So we see the archive menu. Let's check out the technical support. Okay, repository says 17.0 because it runs on the safe boot repository, so that's okay. And SMC looks a little bit different if you come from older version. It's just a enhanced user experience. Everything seems to be okay here. And the migration application is also worth a visit because let's see what happens when we log in the first time. Oh, there's an architectural change and it automatically picks up the REST endpoint and suggests to use it from now. So it updates the migration profile. So now we actually logged in using the new REST connectivity. just checking the tables, so everything's still in place, and back to SMC quickly for the migration profile, because that actually has changed automatically. You can also manually change it and update the REST endpoint for the data store. Thank you for watching this 20.4 to 22.2 update of a development environment, including the non-mandatory repository upgrade. I'm Alex Hansal of the Siebel Hub. Thanks and bye-bye.